My name is Evan Ward, and until 3 weeks ago, I was a senior product designer at Novacraft Technologies. If you've ever held one of our sleek graphite earbuds or tapped through the smooth UI of the Halo Smart tablet, you've seen my fingerprints, even if you didn't know it. I spent 12 years shaping the visual soul of this company. And yesterday morning, I was fired for lacking creativity. It happened in the newly renovated executive conference room, all glass and chrome and fake greenery. The new VP of Design, Miles Redding, sat across from me in a designer suit that probably cost more than my monthly mortgage. He slid a manila envelope across the table, like a waiter serving a bitter dessert. "We need a fresh vision, Evan," he said, like we were discussing lighting options. "You've done great work, phenomenal even, but the market is evolving. The board feels it's time to bring in new energy." I didn't ask who the board was. I didn't protest or plead. I've never been one to beg for a seat at a table I built. I just nodded, picked up the envelope, and said, "Understood." That's the thing about design. People see the surface, smooth lines, elegant curves, but they never see the scaffolding underneath, the hours spent understanding user behavior, ergonomics, material constraints. Creativity isn't wild splashes of color. It's precision under pressure. And that's not something Miles would understand. He came from branding, fonts and slogans, buzzwords like visual rebellion and tactile disruption. I came from sketchbooks and prototypes. I left the room without looking back. My desk was already boxed up when I returned. HR hovered like vultures around a carcass, waiting to sign off on my exit. Someone had even unplugged my charging cable. They gave me 30 minutes to clear out. I took 12. The walk to the parking garage felt longer than usual. I passed by the glass showcase in the lobby where our award-winning designs were displayed. Products I had labored over with bloodshot eyes and callous hands. None bore my name. Just a Novacraft logo, polished and proud. Jenna from procurement passed me near the elevators. "Evan," she asked, glancing at the cardboard box in my arms. "Apparently I'm not creative enough," I said. Her face fell. "You made half the stuff in that showroom." "Fresh vision," I replied, giving her a weak smile. I loaded the box into the trunk of my sedan and sat behind the wheel, hands resting on the steering wheel for a moment. I didn't start the engine. I just stared out at the rain tracing lazy lines down the windshield. No anger, no panic, just silence. I drove home without music, without calls, without even the usual mental checklist of things to finish by end of day. Just me and the Seattle rain. By the time I pulled into my driveway, the numbness was beginning to thaw into something heavier. Claire wasn't home yet, probably still at her architecture studio, knee-deep in models and client revisions. I set the box on the kitchen table, poured myself a coffee, and opened it. A ceramic mug from our first product launch. My old sketch pad, corners dog-eared and spine worn thin. A tiny hand-carved prototype I'd made in the early days, something the team had jokingly called the egg. And at the bottom, tucked between paperwork and pens, my external SSD. I knew what was on it. Dozens of original sketches, CAD files, renderings, ideas that had never seen the light of day because marketing didn't see the value. Concepts that were mine, built on my time with my tools, off the clock. One of them, the modular headset prototype, was already gaining interest from a sustainable startup in Sweden. I'd turned them down a year ago, out of loyalty. Loyalty, I realized, is a currency they no longer accept. I powered up my personal laptop and opened a folder titled Ward Design _ my backup of the backup. These files weren't just blueprints. They were part of my DNA. Every curve, button placement, material choice had a reason. I designed with intent, not flair. Miles wouldn't understand that. He thought creativity was chaos. I believed it was structure wearing a beautiful disguise. The email came later that night. From HR, subject, separation agreement, and IP reminder. I read through it carefully, sipping lukewarm coffee. Boilerplate language. Any product design work created during the term of employment is the intellectual property of Novacraft. That might have been true if I hadn't maintained meticulous records and date-stamped all my external work from the moment I began. My IP? Filed, registered, documented. The irony is they never asked. Not once. Claire came home just past 8. She looked at the box, then at my face. You okay? She asked. Fired, I said softly. Apparently, I'm creatively obsolete. She didn't say anything for a long moment, just wrapped her arms around me and held me there. The silence was better than any pep talk. Later that night, I opened my sketch pad and flipped through old pages. Near the back was a design I'd forgotten about, something modular, minimal, and years ahead of the current Novacraft line. I traced the lines with my thumb. Maybe it was time to stop offering these ideas to people who couldn't see them. Maybe it was time to build something of my own. It started in a damp garage in Redmond, 2011. There was no glass conference table back then, no branding consultants, no multi-million-dollar launch events. Just 4 of us, 2 engineers, 1 marketer, and me, with a $20 coffee maker and a dream that one day our product might sit on a store shelf next to Apple or Sony. Back then, the company wasn't even called Novacraft. It was Pocket Core Labs. The name came from a joke about trying to squeeze high-end performance into devices that fit in your pocket. The logo was a literal fist holding a lightning bolt. We thought it was edgy. In hindsight, it looked like a 3rd-grade science fair project. I was 32, living in a 1-bedroom apartment with more tools and furniture. I'd just left a safe but soul-numbing job at a design agency that specialized in kitchen appliances. For 5 years, I designed toasters. Literally, award-winning toasters. But I needed something more, something that mattered. So when Jamie, a friend from university, called me up and said, "We got seed funding and no designer. Want in?" I didn't hesitate. My first office was a folding table wedged between 2 racks of server parts. I brought my own chair from home because the folding one they gave me made my back ache. But none of that mattered. For the first time, I had full creative control. The first thing I designed was a Core Pod, a wireless smart speaker that actually sounded decent and didn't look like a plastic soup can. The curves were tight, minimal. The materials? Matte graphite composite with recycled aluminum accents. Every button had a reason. Every port had a place. It wasn't flashy, but it felt intentional. It never made it a market. We didn't have the manufacturing connections, but it got us noticed. The design blog Minimal Volume ran a feature titled, "The Smart Speaker Apple Should Have Built." Suddenly, we were getting emails from investors. And just like that, Pocket Core became Novacraft. Jamie became CEO. I became head of design. We moved into an actual office, a windowless floor in a former shoe factory. But to us, it felt like Silicon Valley. We hired a small team, a UX guy named Reed, a materials engineer named Tanya, and eventually a quiet genius named Theo, who could prototype anything in a day. I wasn't chasing fame. I just wanted to make things that worked, beautifully, quietly, and with purpose. I still remember telling Jamie, a good design should feel like it always existed, like we just uncovered it. By 2015, our first commercial success hit, the Nova One wireless earbuds. They were shaped to fit naturally into the ear canal, not like those oversized buds that made everyone look like aliens. I hand-sketched the first concepts at 2 a.m. with a pencil stub and a headache. We sold 50,000 units in the first 3 months. That year, Jamie handed me a bronze plaque, designed by Evan Ward, sound sculpted. I hung in my office. I didn't care about plaques, but I cared about the words. By 2018, we were a mid-sized company with sleek marketing, a growing dev team, and investors with sharp smiles. We released the Halo Smart Tablet and the Echo Band Fitness Tracker. Both were critical and commercial hits. And then, slowly, the seam started to pull. It wasn't obvious at first, just little things. Consultants in meetings, the marketing department insisting on trendier silhouettes, deadlines that left no room for iteration, the kind of pressure that turns thoughtful design into rushed decoration. Then came the reorg. Jamie stepped down, said he wanted to spend more time with his family. I wasn't naive. The board wanted faster growth, bigger margins, flashier campaigns. Jamie didn't fit the mold anymore. Neither did I, but I stayed because of the team, because I believed in what we'd built. The new leadership brought in design strategists with impressive resumes and zero product experience. They started talking about vertical synergy and aesthetics-led disruption. One even said, we should think less like craftsmen and more like influencers. I remember laughing. I thought it was a joke. Then Miles arrived. He was everything the board loved. Young, loud, charismatic. He had a podcast, a book deal, and a closet full of tailored suits. I tried to welcome him. Took him out for coffee the first week. Told him about the early days, our scrappy roots, our process. He smiled politely, then spent the next meeting telling the design team that intuition is dead and we should let AI do 90% of the work. When I pushed back, he called me well-meaning, but stuck in an analog mindset. That was the beginning of the end. Over the next few months, they scrapped 2 of my prototypes, killed an ergonomics initiative we've been working on for a year, prioritized products that looked good on Instagram but felt terrible in hand. I kept my head down, kept designing, kept hoping someone would notice that our user satisfaction scores were dropping, that return rates were creeping up, that long-time customers were starting to ask, what happened? But no one noticed, or they didn't care. And then, one rainy Thursday morning, I was gone. 12 years of product innovation, erased in a 10-minute meeting. But here's the thing they didn't understand. The foundation they stood on, that slick showroom full of bestsellers and industry awards, wasn't theirs. It was mine. It was Reed's, Tanya's, Theo's. It belonged to the ones who sketched and soldered and stayed late not for bonuses, but because we believed in what we were building. And when you forget the people who built your house, don't be surprised when the roof collapses. 3 months after they let me go, Novacraft released their newest flagship product, the Araband. It looked impressive, at least on the billboard. Sleek, wraparound wristband. No physical buttons. An all-glass interface with gesture control and holographic projection. The launch ad had moody lighting, a track by some electropop artist, and the usual buzzwords: revolutionary, disruptive, unforgettable. And yet, for all the noise, it was missing something. So, I watched the keynote online from my kitchen counter with a reheated cup of coffee, and my cat curled beside the laptop. Miles stood center stage, spinning phrases like design-forward minimalism and conscious integration. His suit shimmered under the lights. The crowd applauded on cue. But I noticed the little things. The design seams he hoped no one would see. The gesture system was clunky. The band didn't contour naturally to the wrist. The display had a lag when switching modes. And the most glaring problem? The device forgot what real users needed. Tactile orientation, battery efficiency, comfort over long hours. Miles wasn't selling a product. He was selling a performance. And within a week, the cracks showed. Reddit threads exploded with teardown videos. Tech Rewired posted a brutal hands-on review titled, Araband is all style, no substance. By week 2, return rates were climbing. Customer support forums were filled with frustrated posts about connectivity issues, wrist discomfort, and interface bugs. One reviewer called it the prettiest mistake you'll ever wear. I didn't gloat. I didn't smile. Because it wasn't just a company faltering. It was people I'd worked alongside for years trying to hold a system together with duct tape and apologies. Reed messaged me late one night. They rushed the UX. We told them it wasn't ready. They didn't listen. Tanya followed with, can't fix it. We need to rework the internals. Miles won't approve. And finally, Theo, they fired 2 junior engineers for underperformance. Wasn't their fault. I'm considering quitting. I read their messages in silence, fingers hovering over the keyboard, unsure what to say. I didn't want revenge. I wanted recognition. For the work, for the process, for the hundreds of invisible hours that go into a product that just feels right. The irony was almost poetic. The man fired for lacking creativity had built the very design language their customers now craved. And the man who replaced him had managed to break it in less than a fiscal quarter. One afternoon, As I reviewed some freelance projects, my phone buzzed with an unfamiliar number. I ignored it. It buzzed again. Then again. Voicemail. Hi, Evan. This is Carmen from Novacraft's board. I was hoping we could talk off the record about some transitional challenges we're experiencing. Call me if you're available. Transitional challenges. That's how they say everything's on fire in corporate. I didn't call back. Instead, I opened a project folder on my desktop titled Project Row. Inside were 3D renders, ergonomic studies, materials research, all focused on a modular wearable I'd started designing 2 years ago. A hybrid between a smartwatch, a fitness tracker, and a productivity assistant. Simple, adaptable, intuitive. I'd shelved it after Miles dismissed it in a meeting, calling it old school thinking. Now it felt like prophecy. The problem with people like Miles is that they think vision is a brand asset, something you print on posters or drop into TEDx talks. But vision is a muscle. It's built from repetition, failure, listening, from understanding that users don't care about your buzzwords. They care if your product works when they need it to. That week, I received 3 more calls. 2 from HR, 1 from a VP I'd barely spoken to in years. The messages grew more urgent. Just a quick discussion. We value your insight. We'd like to revisit the terms of your exit. I didn't respond, but I did draft an email. Not to them. To a man named Jonas Eriksson, co-founder of a small Scandinavian tech collective called Nordworks. He'd reached out last year after seeing one of my independent concepts online. Back then, I'd turned him down. Loyalty again. This time, I attached the row files. He replied in under an hour. Let's talk. We got the tools. You've got the vision. The call lasted 2 hours. I spoke more freely than I had in years. No jargon, no politics. Just design, function, simplicity. He got it. By the end of the week, I'd signed a consulting contract with Nordworks. Remote flexibility, full creative control, royalties, and no corporate theater. They didn't want to turn me into a mascot. They wanted me to build. Meanwhile, Novacraft continued to spiral. They issued 2 firmware updates in 3 weeks. Both failed to fix core issues. A product recall was rumored but denied. Their stock price dipped, then dipped again. Reed finally called. You were right, he said, without bitterness. No, I said, I just listen to people who use the things we build. He paused. What are you working on now? Something quieter, but better. He laughed softly. If you ever need a UX guy. I smiled. You'll be the first. Before hanging up, he said something that stuck with me. They thought they could fake vision, but the user saw right through it. Yes, they always do. My first video call with Nordworks felt nothing like a corporate meeting. There was no sterile backdrop, no marketing jargon, no awkward small talk about Q3 projections. Just Jonas Eriksson in a wool sweater, sipping black coffee in what looked like a sunlit kitchen somewhere outside Stockholm. Design is like carpentry, he said early in the call. It should feel honest and last longer than the person who built it. I remember nodding before I even realized it. I hadn't felt that understood in years. Jonas introduced me to the rest of the team. Sophia, a materials engineer who'd worked in sustainable packaging. Amir, a firmware developer with a background in medical devices. And Emil, a soft-spoken designer with an absurdly good sense of spatial layout. They weren't flashy, but they were sharp. The kind of people who didn't talk to impress. You could tell they'd rather build something than brand it. Within the week, I was looped into their core project. ARC, a modular, sustainable wearable that could adapt to user needs instead of forcing one-size-fits-all. Fitness tracker one day, productivity hub the next. Everything snapped together with magnetic connectors and ran on a lightweight OS built from scratch. They'd nailed the concept. What they needed was form. So I sent them my design from Project Row. 3 days later, Sophia sent me a message. This is it. This is exactly what we've been trying to say, but in form. No back and forth. No corporate revisions. No executives asking how it would photograph on TikTok. Just mutual respect. We got to work. The pace was fast but clean. Ideas flew back and forth in rapid threads. Jonas made a rule early on. No meetings longer than 30 minutes unless we were sketching live. It was chaos in the best possible way. By month 2, we had a working prototype. By month 3, we had 2. And by the 4th, we were accepted into the Kyoto Design Symposium, an international showcase known for spotlighting products that fused innovation with sustainability. I flew to Japan in March. Paid my own way. I didn't care. Standing at the Nordworks booth, holding ARC in my hand, I felt something I hadn't felt since the first NovaCraft prototype. Clarity. ARC wasn't trying to disrupt. It was trying to serve. The interface was quiet, intuitive. The body curved naturally to the wrist, with modular expansion pods that clicked on like Legos. No voice assistant. No neon lights. Just a design that respected the user's time and attention. We didn't use buzzwords. We used intention. The reaction was immediate. Tech journalists lingered. One from Design Matter called it the future of wearables without the ego. Another, from a German tech blog, just whispered, finally, before asking for a demo. By day 3, we had a list of potential licensing partners, distributors, and 2 sustainability awards. Back home, NovaCraft was still spinning. Their attempt at a software patch bricked thousands of devices. Miles issued a public apology on LinkedIn, full of generic regret and zero accountability. I didn't feel smug, just sad, because the fall of NovaCraft wasn't just one man's mistake. It was a system that allowed the wrong people to make the wrong decisions for the wrong reasons. I got an email the next day from Jenna, the one who had seen me carry my box on the day I was fired. Subject, they miss you. She wrote about how the office had changed, how meetings had become quieter, colder, how most of the original team had either left or were looking. They say you lack creativity, she wrote, but everything that worked came from you. I stared at that line for a long time, because I used to think creativity meant making things look new. But maybe creativity is about making things that last. Jonas called me the next morning. We've had 3 offers, he said. 1 from a European electronics brand. 2 from U.S. manufacturers. He paused. They all want to license ARC. All 3 want you on board full-time. I looked out the window. Rain again. Typical Seattle spring. Can I ask something first? I said, of course. Do we have control over how it's built, how it's priced, how it's supported? Jonas smiled. That's why they call it licensing. We don't give it away. We choose how it lives. That was all I needed. A week later, we signed a deal with Iratech, a Scandinavian-American hybrid company with a spotless ethical track record and a reputation for long-term partnerships. No cash grab. No compromises. We retained full design control. Jonas negotiated for recycled materials. Amir ensured software stability. And I asked for one clause. All collaborators share equity. No more unsung builders. No more plaques with someone else's name. When the official launch date was set for the fall, Iratech's marketing head asked if I wanted to be featured in the press rollout. Do you want a title? She asked. Chief Design Officer? Head Architect. I thought about it for a second, then shook my head. I don't need a title, I said. I just need a platform. The knock on my door came at 7:18 a.m. Too early for delivery. Too polite for a neighbor. I was halfway through a piece of toast, still in sweatpants, when I opened the door and saw Brent Lasker, NovaCraft's corporate counsel, standing there in a blazer too stiff for this side of town. He gave me a thin smile, like we were old friends catching up. Mr. Ward, he said, adjusting his collar. Hope I didn't wake you. You didn't, I said, but you're here about something I'm not selling. He held up his hands in mock surrender. I'm just a messenger. Behind him stood Vanessa Ortega, head of product strategy. She'd always been level-headed, smart, the type of person who remembered birthdays and bug logs equally well. But today, she looked like she hadn't slept in a week. Can we talk? She asked, her voice lower than usual. I stepped aside. They didn't sit. Brent paced. Vanessa stayed near the window, arms crossed. We're aware, Brent began, that you've been consulting with certain European firms. I said nothing. Several of our long-term clients have expressed interest in a new wearable platform they saw showcased in Kyoto, one that bears, how shall I say, distinct similarities to legacy Novacraft design philosophy. I took another bite of toast. You mean the philosophy you said lacked creativity? Brent exhaled slowly. We're not here to argue definitions. Vanessa cut in. Evan, the Araband's failure triggered a chain reaction. Our enterprise contracts are hanging by threads. Support costs are through the roof. We've lost 3 senior engineers and... She hesitated. And Miles is gone. I blinked. Resigned, she clarified. Well, strongly encouraged to. Brent picked up the thread. The board would like to make you an offer. Return as a design consultant. Help us stabilize the platform. Bring your perspective back into fold. There it was. Not an apology. Not even an admission. Just a proposition, wrapped in desperation. What about my exit agreement? I asked. Brent nodded. We'll waive all restrictions. Increase your comp. Add royalties to any product you contribute to. We're willing to be flexible. And what happens if I say no? He paused. Then Novacraft will continue its search for answers without the person who created the foundation of our most beloved products. I looked at Vanessa. She wouldn't meet my eyes. I let the silence stretch. I'm not coming back, I said finally. Brent's face didn't move, but his shoulders dropped slightly. You understand, then, he said, that Irateca's acquisition of your latest design puts you in competition with Novacraft. I understand that innovation doesn't owe loyalty to mismanagement. I walked him to the door. Before leaving, Vanessa turned and said quietly, I'm sorry, Evan. We needed you. We just didn't realize it until it was too late. I nodded. You weren't the only one. 2 weeks later, I was back in Sweden. Jonas had flown me in for the final round of product integration before the global launch. ARC's factory line was humming. Lean, clean, and already booked out 6 months with pre-orders. Our licensing deal had turned into something deeper, a collaboration with trust at the center. We didn't design products. We designed systems that adapted to people. I spent a lot of time walking the assembly floor, not checking, just watching. The precision of it all, the rhythm. Each unit that rolled off the line felt like closure, like proof. On a rainy Tuesday afternoon, just before we were due to sign the final distribution agreement, my phone buzzed. Unknown caller. U.S. number. I answered. Evan. The voice was familiar. Sharper now. Less cocky. Miles. Didn't expect this, I said. I figured. A pause. I saw the ARC demo. It's good. It's useful, I said. There's a difference. He laughed bitterly. Yeah, I'm learning that. Why are you calling? Because I was wrong. I didn't respond. I thought vision was about noise. Being louder, bolder, shinier. I didn't realize that real design, the kind that matters, is quieter, almost invisible. I said nothing. I screwed up, he said finally. I fired the wrong guy. I chased buzz instead of value. Another pause. They might let me take a role with a different firm. A second chance. I don't want to make the same mistake twice. I almost pitted him. Almost. I hope you find your compass, I said, but I've already found mine. Click. By July, ARC was live in 5 countries. The reviews were glowing. Not flashy, just depreciative. Words like understated, thoughtful, and quietly brilliant kept appearing. One blog wrote, "This is what happens when design listens instead of shouts." Back in Seattle, Novacraft stock had taken a 17% hit. A major healthcare client dropped them. Miles' replacement, a finance guy, issued a company-wide memo about course correction and operational streamlining. Reed sent it to me with the subject line, "Here we go again." But I didn't smile, because it wasn't about their fall. It was about our rise. Jonas asked me to write a short message for our internal launch letter. Something personal. A reflection. I stared at the screen for a while before typing. ARC wasn't built to win headlines. It was built to stay useful when the spotlight fades. Design isn't about ego. It's about empathy. We don't need noise. We need tools that understand us. Thank you for helping me build something that listens. Evan, 1 year later, I stood on a small stage in Copenhagen, holding a product that started as a napkin sketch in my garage. ARC had launched in 22 countries, not with fanfare or viral videos, but through quiet, consistent performance. Hospitals adopted it for patient monitoring. Athletes used it for adaptive training. Even educators found ways to integrate its modular interface into classrooms for special needs students. And now, we were announcing something new. I looked out at the audience, designers, engineers, students, and former colleagues. Somewhere in the second row sat Reed. In the back corner, I spotted Sophia. And on the screen behind me, our team's new initiative, ARC Open, an open-source version of our wearable platform, free for nonprofit developers, educators, and independent inventors. We didn't build art to dominate a market. I said into Mike, we built it because we believe technology should adapt to people, not the other way around. I glanced at the banner beside me. No glossy slogans. Just 4 words in a clean sans serif font. Design that belongs to everyone. That night, back in the hotel, I found a quiet bench near the harbor. The wind was sharp. I zipped up my coat and watched ships drift past in the distance. I remembered the way Novacraft's lobby used to smell like fresh varnish and burning ambition. I remembered the taste of cold coffee at 3 a.m., sketching the original curves of the Nova 1. And I remembered the look in Miles's eyes when he told me I was out of ideas. The truth is, I wasn't running out of ideas. I was just in the wrong room. Across the harbor, a small cafe was still lit. Inside, 2 young designers sat by the window, animated, probably arguing over prototypes and battery constraints and pixel ratios. I smiled. The work goes on. And that's the thing about real creativity. It doesn't need applause. It just needs a reason. 6 months later, NordWorks launched our mentorship program. We brought in 8 student designers from 4 countries, gave them tools, access, and, most importantly, ownership. The first project? A wearable for field medics in low-resource environments. Low power, durable casing, modular communication add-ons. Their prototype won an award in Berlin. None of them had a title. They just had a platform. One quiet Sunday morning, I sat on my porch back in Seattle, coffee in hand, ARC 2 in my pocket, still smooth, still modular, but now with features I hadn't imagined. Jonas had flown in for a visit. We were going fishing later. It had become a tradition. Before we left, he looked at me and said, "You ever think about how it all turned out?" I nodded. Sometimes. Any regrets? I watched the bird land on the fence post, thought about the missed meetings, the mistakes, the early years in that garage, thought about the day they let me go. Then I shook my head. No, because I know the difference now. Between what? Between building something, I said, and belonging to it. Jonas smiled. That's the hard part, isn't it? Maybe, I said, but it's also the part worth protecting. We didn't speak for a while after that. Just packed up our gear, climbed into the truck, and drove toward the lake. The wind was quiet. The road ahead was clear. And for the first time in a long time, I wasn't chasing anything. I was exactly where I was supposed to be,